How many Puritans do you know? Don't think too hard. The answer is 0. Puritans are like dinosaurs. They are extinct. I'll tell you what happened to them in just a minute, but don't worry, things worked out well. Many of their descendants turned into New England Yankees. Others are spread all across the nation. Many go to the Congregational Church. In some ways, however, we are all descendants of the Puritans. Now, you may be shaking your head if you live in California or Colorado or West Virginia. If your parents came from Mexico or China, you're probably saying, "No way am I a Puritan." But it's true. If you are an American, you are a descendant of the Puritans, at least a little bit. Because many American laws and ideas come from Puritan laws and ideas, and they are some of the best we have. You see, the Puritans hoped to build a place on earth where people could live as the Bible says they should, a place where people would be truly good. Governor Winthrop called Puritan Massachusetts a city upon a hill. That phrase, city upon a hill, is one to put in your head and remember. You'll hear it again and again when you read American history. Anyway, Governor Winthrop expected the city to stand tall as a symbol to the rest of the world. "The eyes of all people are upon us," he said. The Puritans came to the New World to try and build a godly community where they could live close to perfect lives. No human beings have ever been able to do that, but the Puritans tried. To make their community pure, the Puritans expected everyone to act like a spy and report any neighbor who did or said anything wrong. Can you see how that might make you a little uncomfortable around your neighbors? Maybe that helped cause the Puritans' downfall. Or perhaps it was their seriousness that did them in. Or witches, we'll get to them soon. Or their self-righteousness. Self-righteous people believe they know the truth. They think that anyone who doesn't agree with them is wrong. They are apt to judge other people. Sometimes the Puritans were like that. They spent time judging their neighbors. They read the Bible every day, but they didn't always pay attention to the passage in the New Testament that asks, "Why do you observe the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and never notice the log in your own?" What does that mean? Benjamin Franklin, one of the wisest of all Americans, wrote in his autobiography a warning against using words like certainly, undoubtedly, or any others that give the air of positiveness to an opinion. Instead, said Franklin, we should say, "It appears to me," or "I think it so or so," or "if I am not mistaken." But the Puritans were very sure of themselves. They believed that God saves only a very few people and that the rest go to a terrible hell filled with fires. They thought that God decided when a child was born if he was saved or not. They used the word elected instead of saved, and they thought they were God's elect. Because of that, they thought they should act like God's elect and lead good lives. And that's why we can be happy they were among the first colonists. They really tried their best to be good. They worked hard. They believed in learning. And they did what they thought was right. But the Puritans had a big problem. They were human, and they made mistakes. Their ministers didn't help. The ministers said that people were naturally sinful, but if they sinned, they would go to that terrible hell. That kept everyone under constant pressure to be close to perfect. No one could relax. And that may be what caused the nightmare of the witches. The whole world believed in witches. There was nothing new about that. People thought that if you wanted to make a bargain with the devil, you could do it, and then torment people and fly through the air on a broomstick, or become invisible and squeeze through keyholes. Everyone just knew that witches could create thunder, sink ships, kill sheep, and make tables and chairs rattle. Back in the days of Christopher Columbus, Pope Innocent VIII had issued orders that witches were to be burned. So in Switzerland, during 3 months in 1515, more than 500 witches went to the stake. Soon, fires were lit in France and Germany and all over Europe. England's King James wrote a book about witches. But he wasn't alone. London's publishers were busy with the subject. In the 17th century, Parliament appointed Matthew Hopkins as witch finder. And Hopkins found a lot of witches. Anyone with a pimple or a wart or a mole was a suspect. Those were said to be devil's marks. It was amazing. After torture, many people confessed to knowing the devil. In the colonies, some men and women were hanged or drowned for witchery, but what happened in Salem, Massachusetts, was different from the usual story. It all began with some little girls and their servant, Tituba. Now, Tituba was a poor woman from the West Indies who told stories of the devil and witches and voodoo. The girls were 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris, 11-year-old Abigail Williams, and their friends. Tituba's stories must have been scary, especially around the fire at night. But when Tituba taught the girls to bark like dogs and meow like cats and grunt like hogs, well, that might have been fun. Although Elizabeth's father, the Reverend Samuel Parris, didn't think it was fun at all. When he saw the children grunting and meowing and sometimes acting as if they were having fits or spasms, he remembered reading books from England about spells laid on people by witches. And then, to everyone's astonishment, on Sunday the girls spoke out during church meeting and said silly things. "There's a yellow bird on the minister's head," cried Anne Putnam. No one would interrupt a church service except the devil. So when the girls said Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba were bewitching them, everyone believed them. The 2 Sarahs denied the charge, but they were old and poor, and no one listened to them, especially after Tituba said that she did indeed fly through the air on a broomstick. The little girls might have been pretended when they started, but soon they were telling of torture and witchery, and perhaps they convinced themselves. Or maybe now they were afraid to tell the truth. Their stories grew longer and their screeches louder. They accused one person after another of putting spells on them. People came from all over Massachusetts to watch them squeal and grunt. What was to be done? Suddenly, anything that went wrong in that little town was the fault of a witch. Salem was mad with witch fever. 5-year-old Dorcas Good was taken to jail and chained to her mother when the girls said she was tormenting them. Then other people began talking of witches and pointing at their neighbors. A court was called to hear the evidence. The judges were scared, like everyone else. The leaders of the community, who might have done some thinking, didn't. More than 100 people were tried as witches. 20 people and 2 dogs were put to death. Then the Reverend Hale's wife was accused. But there was no one in Massachusetts more beloved and godly than she. Could it be that the girls were wrong? Everyone had believed them. No one had believed the victims. Were those people who had been killed innocent? Yes, an awful tragedy had occurred. The witch trials were a shameful chapter in American history. Although when one of the judges, Samuel Sewall, realized the wrong that had been done, he publicly apologized. The court cleared the names of those who had died. That makes this story better than some. It was a time of witch fear. There had been many witch hangings and burnings in Europe and America, but never before was there a public apology. But something devilish did die in that little town of Salem. It was the belief in witchcraft. Most people had learned a sad lesson.